Get started. So we'll call the meeting to order at 10:32. Unfortunately, I forgot to add to the agenda the approval of the agenda meeting minutes for the last meeting we had. So unless, Brandon, you tell me that we can do it without it being on the agenda, I'll have to add it to the next one. Okay. I apologize for that. I missed that. So this would take us to item number 2, provide results of the subcommittee meeting held on July 21st, 2025. So this was the item that you all requested in terms of clarifying the on-call response. So we did meet. We came to a consensus on that clarification and the wording. So I'm going to read that, and then we can have that discussion. If we all agree, then Brandon can write that up, and we can push it through with signatures. So it reads as follows. On-call response is to be used when an employee is called out to work on their scheduled time off and does not apply to time extended on a shift, with the exception of response to event requests from other agencies, departments, or divisions, when response is necessary to ensure public safety and no alternative options are available, with the approval of the Chief of Police or his designee. On-call response will be paid at 150% at a premium rate. This overtime will be capped at the budgeted amount. Once this value is exceeded, on-call response overtime will convert to call-out pay. Any expense that exceed the budgeted amount will need to be funded through the police operating budget. Those final 3 sentences are currently in place in the current agreement. So, any discussion on that?
Oh, come on. There we go. Is any other city division capped at a certain dollar amount for OCR pay?
Not at a dollar amount. There is, I imagine, some sort of a budget that's assigned to them. So the budget would be their cap.
So is there a rule written somewhere about how if they exceed that budgeted amount that it then converts to something else?
It's not a written rule, no, but it would then have to be funded from, I'm not sure.
Other accounts.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's still eligible for FLSA. So it's 150 plus the eligibility for FLSA if that applies, correct?
Is that correct? I think that's correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We agreed that that's what we discussed and worked out in subcommittee.
Okay. I think we've got that right. Have to write that up as a TA and then get that signed. So we'll get that at the next meeting. Okay, item 3. Oh, do I have to call for a vote? Yeah. Okay, so if I could get a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, item 3, continuation of discussion and possible action on items presented at the July 10th, 2025 meeting to be considered for the 2026 Meet and Confer agreement. So before we move into talking about each one of these items, which we are prepared to do, I do want to offer an alternative option that we haven't discussed in previous meetings, and that's to extend the current agreement to September 31st of 2026, with the acceptance, of a 5% increase across the board that was approved by City Council on August 5th. And the only additions or changes made being the development of the sick leave payout plan and adding the on-call response clarification statements that we've agreed upon. The biggest driver for this recommendation on our behalf is that this gives us an opportunity to collect that class and comp data, which would allow us to make a more informed decision and obviously council to approve the developed plan that we come up with that data. We would then be prepared to come back to the table in January, February timeframe to go over those results and the development of that plan. We've got rooms ready to caucus if that's something that you all want to discuss. I guess the only other note that I would add to that is that this means that if for some reason we do discuss each one of these items that was presented at the last meeting in terms of compensation, the only thing we have available at this point is council has approved, which is that 5% increase, just because we don't have any other compensation data. One of the other things that council was told is that once we get that class and comp data, that we are prepared to talk about funding something mid-year. So this doesn't necessarily mean that we would have to wait until the end of that agreement or October 1 or anything like that. It might be a mid-year implementation.
What is I understand y'all just did budget workshops, correct? And the city has approved this 5%? Wow, that's really loud. So based on that, what is y'all's forecasted fund for the unassigned funds for next year?
For the what funds, I'm sorry?
Unassigned funds? Because the current budget had y'all at 49.7, rounding up, 49.7 million in unassigned funds. So what is y'all's forecasted budget in the unassigned funds for next year?
Do you mean the,
Fund balances?
with that five?
The
fund
fund
balance?
balances, unassigned funds has 49.7 million.
Where are you pulling that number from?
Your website?
From the ACFR or?
Would be the balance sheet, governmental funds dated September 30th, 2024.
Okay, so we keep a 90-day fund balance in our reserves. That's our best practices. And so that's what we would try to keep in that fund balance. What you're pulling is audited information from the website. And that's not necessarily how we operate. We actually operate on a cash basis until year end when we make audit adjustments. And so what we would consider available would be what we have on our monthly basis, Blue Book statements.
I understand, but with the exception of 23 to 24, that unassigned fund balance had increased year over year. So help me understand why the city is maintaining almost $50 million in an unassigned fund balance. This is just basically money for the city to sit on.
Okay. There are two answers. There is first an examination of what she said. She said that essentially, from an internal perspective, what you're reading is GAAP financials. And that would, if we were to look at your own financial statements, in your own fund balance, you would have equity in your home, equity in your car, and then cash on hand, let's say. From and that would be GAAP basis. But if you look at, we want to go on vacation next month, or we want to need to replace that fence, what's available to be spent on that new fence? We wouldn't say that the equity in your home or the equity in your car is available to spend. And so from an internal perspective, we consider a liquid fund balance what we operate with. And so that's the basis behind her answer. Behind her answer, she's saying we have a 90-day liquid fund balance so that when a governing board says, what's available to replace that fence? Or in the case of the city, what's available to replace that street? We have liquid money ready to spend that can be spent and allocated and spent for those projects. And so that's the substance behind what she's saying. And the substance behind that 90-day is it's a best practice to hold 90 days fund balance. So if you run into a flood, for example, that creates a temporary impairment in revenues, you have some capacity there, just like having a savings account at home. So that's the purpose behind that. Now, the direct answer for you is why would we maintain that? Because it's a best practice, it helps with our bond ratings, and it helps when we do have revenue downturns or interruptions. That's really the substance of your side of the answer. Why would we maintain that kind of money?
Yeah, I appreciate the explanation. Just, so for plain English, what the city is saying is that there's approximately, again, rounding up slightly, $50 million that sits, that can be used at the discretion of council or whoever, but y'all keep it sitting there just in case the wheels fall off, essentially is what we're talking about here?
Well, I don't think it's 50. What's 90 days, Tina? Ballpark.
The blue book right now.
I think that 50 includes some non-liquid items that we wouldn't say is available to be spent. So, in short, the answer is yes, not that amount, but yes, the city does hold monies. They're not hiding it. It's fund balance and it's reported, so it's not
Right.
hidden.
No, I'm
but
I'm not saying that y'all had it. I mean, I found it. I'm not a investigator extraordinaire. I found it pretty easily, so it's right there, public facing. But I just want to make sure we understand that there are funds available that can be spent on things that council deems important enough.
Yes.
They're just choosing not to deem this important enough.
So,
And I understand that's your boss, so you have to be careful with your words, but
right now, on a cash basis, what we actually have liquid and available is 90 days of fund balance because we just took a budget amendment to city council at the last meeting to use what was available over the 90 days. And that is part of our budget policy is to keep a 90-day fund balance. It's also GFOA best practices. But additionally, one-time use of a fund balance is not a sustainable source of revenue to offset an expenditure.
yeah, I agree. And that's why I made sure to point out the fact that with the exception of 24 to 25, that unassigned fund balance has increased. This was the last, this last budgetary session was the last time, or the only time I could find that fund actually decreased. So obviously, there's some savings going on somewhere, because money keeps getting put, into the unassigned fund balance, and it's increasing year over year. So again, if it's only a 90-day, then I guess the question is, what is that number? What is the number, your best practices number for a 90-day rainy day fund, essentially?
$24 million, which is what, after the second reading of the budget amendment on August 19th, that's what will be available, is the $24 million that equates to a 90-day fund balance.
Okay, so I guess now my question is, if it's 24 million, then what happened to the other approximately $25 million?
24 is what's liquid and available. The 25 is not liquid and available. It's tied up in receivables, money we haven't received yet, probably could be tied up in assets. If it would take an analysis to reconcile the gap fund balance to the budget basis fund balance. And the budget basis fund balance, which is what she's talking about, is what we would declare as available to be spent. So we're saying that the rest of that's not available to be spent because it's not liquid cash.
Okay, I understand your explanation. I guess a
You-
balance,
you-
a fund
you-
balance doesn't actually mean a fund balance. It means something different in city bureaucracy.
And it can mean different things for different funds. And so you're on the right track, that there is a segment in there which could be dedicated for a priority item that council declared. But at this point, they're declaring that that best practice for 90 days is their priority.
So, and I understand and I agree, we don't want any cities going under because of a lack of planning by the governmental body. But just because this is an open meeting, I want to make sure that it is on the record that that means that council does not view the police department being 14% below average as an emergency or as a reason to designate some additional funds, but instead we're going to continue to increase this unassigned fund balance.
Well, there are two aspects to a response to that. First of all would be a reminder, Tina just pointed out that a fund balance is a pool. It's not a continuous flow. And so it would be, it doesn't solve the problem if we take fund balance that exists at one time and use it for a year after year expense. So we try to match, when we use fund balance, we try to match one-time expenses. We try to use that for things that are one-time. And so we try to look for recurring revenues to fund those recurring expenses. And I would say there's no disputing your conclusion that it has not been a priority for council. They struggle with allocating among competing priorities, and I think to say that looking forward is where we want to go. Council has allocated in excess of $100,000 to get a consultant's opinion about exactly where we are. And to the extent that that helps, that is their commitment. And to the extent it helps, they dedicated, they didn't blink an eye at trying to get all of that 5% for city employees this year. And so I think if we look back, it'd be foolish to say that this year's 5% commitment is a commitment to 100% or something else. However, it is a step in the right direction.
Oh, thank you.
And I would also point out that of that fund balance that we did approve the use of in the last meeting, a good portion of that did go for police department requests to the tune of about $600,000. So I would definitely not say that it's not a priority for the city council.
No, and I appreciate that, and I'm aware that the city did acquiesce to some of the chief's requests. But please keep in mind that the chief's requests are not representative of this bargaining unit. And those are two separate, essentially, pools of money that we're looking at.
I think the other thing, as we consider moving forward, the state has really, with the legislation they've passed in recent years, have really pushed cities to force the issue with the public when they want to go up over a small amount. And I think we're on that precipice at this municipality that I think we're being forced, if we're going to go up the kind of money that we think the study may reveal, if we're going to try to catch all that up, we're probably going to have to go to the voters for that. And so those conversations are being had in-house, and for the last couple of years, we've talked about how do we handle that. In fact, we've talked with our Meet and Confer folks about how does that take shape in what we agreed to and subsequently. I think the state just, there's even more talk about, I don't know if that passed or if we're at the deadline yet, to reduce the 3.5% cap down to 2.5%. Do you know if it passed?
It hasn't passed yet. It passed the Senate, the Texas State Senate, but it hasn't passed the House yet.
So I think we're really being backed into a corner where if we're gonna consider those kinds of changes, if the results show we need to go up dramatically, and if we believe those results, and if we're committed to a way to find those results, I think we're going to have to ask the voters for approval for that kind of thing. And that was really kind of at the heart of this, when we talked about, do you want to go with the 5%? And then I don't think there's any way to avoid us picking this issue back up in 6 months when we get the study results. I think it's necessary to consider the results, establish a plan that the internal stakeholders think makes sense, and then, and I think it's going to be difficult to establish a plan that doesn't include an election, unless those data centers all build like that.
I will say that we're doing everything on our part to try to reach out to the legislation and hope for, them to pull back on what they're trying to do with cities and the ability to generate revenue. We drafted a letter last week for the mayor and city manager to sign, sent it to Charles Perry and Drew Darby before that vote took place to reduce it to 2.5%. So we're doing everything we can, and I think maybe there's more power in numbers if we can get more cities to reach out to their legislation and, other associations, things like that. But like Michael said, without that, they're just going to keep pushing and pushing to reduce our ability to provide services to the public, so.
I'd like to ask for a caucus real quick for us.
Sure, no problem. This conference room right up here by the symphony is available and open, so we'll caucus at 10:53. I think we've got everybody. Yep, your side. Okay, so we'll call the meeting back to order at 11:36.
Okay, so we had the opportunity to kind of talk through what y'all had offered. And we, in watching the council budget workshops and things, we understand that they allotted 5% across the board raises. And so I think we might be amenable to that. There's still a lot of other things, monetary and non-monetary, that we wanted to talk about. So as far as like just a blanket issue of extending it for a year and everything else staying the status quo, I think there's some more things that we want to talk about.
Okay.
Monetarily, I know that y'all also reserved what is essentially 1% pay raise across the board to fix what you can after the pay and classification study mid.
Oh, I think that was proposed, but it didn't.
Oh, it didn't happen?
No, it didn't come to fruition, so there is going to be no reserve through this budget process.
Okay, so then I guess my question is, what is the expectation of anything happening mid-year as far as?
Tina, do you want to talk about the process for funding something mid-year, if that's what the results show?
That would be subject, obviously, to availability. If we had sales tax perform, far exceed what we budget, or interest income, or some other revenue source, or had an expenditure source that we could cut, mid-year, we just have to look at it when the time comes and see where we could pull funding.
So I think where we're kind of at is like you had proposed. We had initially set a 2-year agreement, and I think based on the pay and comparison study coming out, later this year, and those sorts of things, and then y'all talking about a mid-year adjustment potentially. I think we're kind of on the same page as far as we just want to move 1 year in the future on this contract. I don't think we necessarily want anything as far as a reopener mid-year or anything like that. Where if the pay and classification study comes back and the council starts, because we understand that a lot a lot of the, I guess, ways that we're looking at that holistically as a city is this person over here in a lower classification than what they should be as far as pay grade sort of thing. And so I don't think we want anything like that. We would still like, in lieu of that, to look at the nighttime differential and that change to the PTO daily training rate. The overall cost to that is significantly less than across the board raises. It would improve morale, especially on our night shift guys that, work overnights every day while a lot of people are sleeping. And then looking at, those are really the only monetary things that we were looking at in, as far as this. There's disciplinary language like we talked about. I brought up at the last time, there would be a cost associated with it, but I don't know exactly what that cost would be. But counting vacation days, WOW days, United Way days, as hours worked when calculating FLSA for vacation for sworn officers. And so those are still kind of the things that we're wanting to talk about in this contract.
Okay, so let me, for the purpose of clarification, y'all would consider extending with the 5% increase, the development of the sick leave payout plan, the on-call response clarification statement, and negotiating through this process some of the other financial requests or financially impacted requests in lieu of opening the contract back up when the study results are available.
Right, so the only caveat to that would be if council for some reason says, oh, well, man, we are so far behind and we didn't realize this and we're gonna give all city employees a 2% raise or some sort of across the board raise, that we be included in that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't think we would
That's
anybody's.
the only thing on that. It's not, we wouldn't come back and say, hey, we want to go back to the bargaining table and say, this is what our pay classification study, we can wait until this time next year for that.
I think we've had isn't that a most favored nations clause or something like that? I think we've had that before.
Yeah, generally it's on our side, we referred to it as a Me Too clause. Everybody else gets something what we want it to.
I think we've done that before. That's understandable.
So the extension of the agreement, September 31st, 2026, is that something that you are considering, or do y'all want to do until December of 26? We sort of wanted to align it with the fiscal year.
Yeah, and I think the reason we originally didn't was to give us kind of extra cushion in the event that, because we do think, we here do things a little bit later than most cities that are doing meet and confer. Most of their contracts are decided and approved by May or June. And so obviously we're not getting our revenue streams finalized until start of August, end of July. And so we understand that there's that. So I think we could work either way.
Okay. Well, I think we will need to caucus Do y'all need any other clarification as far as what the request is? Okay.
Before y'all break, while we're talking about, the contract length, excuse me, I would appreciate it if y'all could at least discuss internally the possibility of maybe adjusting the timeline. So we're actually bargaining with some equity as opposed to asking for crumbs that's left over from the budgetary session. So maybe we begin bargaining in a timeline that includes us in these budgeting talks as opposed to that being set, and then we get to, ask for crumbs from the master's table kind of situation.
Yeah, I don't think that's an issue. Okay, if we could caucus, that would be great. So we'll caucus at 11:45? You good? Yes, ma'am, sorry. No, you're good. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order at 12:07. Michael's going to take it away.
I think where we are is we are limited in what we're able to negotiate for by the resources that council is allocating. Where we're not limited is we're very open to how you think those resources are best allocated. And so council allocated approximately $918,000 associated, that's a 5% across the board raise for y'all. They allocated some one-time things that could be attributed to y'all. Those really aren't in play because they allocate those for specific purposes. And you've made a proposal I thought was a great way to approach it on the leave payoffs, and that was that you proposed something that was cost neutral. I think we're open to work with you on whatever you see as a priority. What is out of our control is an expansion of the resources which would be available to pay for things. And so that's one of the reasons that I think your leave payoff proposal is attractive, because it pays for itself, or it has the potential to pay for itself. And so I think what we wanted to let you know was we've got a hard limitation that we don't have any authority over. But up to that limitation, we're absolutely open to work with you on what you see as priorities. And so that's really kind of a non-answer, but it does help with boundaries, help for you to know what the boundaries are we're faced with, and we're open to work with you on how to make that work.
What was the dollar amount number that y'all had?
I think Jonathan has the details, but I think it was approximately 918,000 is equivalent to 5% across the board. Is that civil service and non-civil service? Is that everybody in PD? Just civil service? But
And does that include our chiefs and assistant chiefs in that figure?
Just the assistant chiefs. That number doesn't include assistant chiefs.
so if some combination of sick leave, payoff, alteration, I think you said that there were some savings that go with that, and could we use part of those savings or use those savings for this or that? Or if you felt like in lieu of 5%, 4% plus some sort of pay differential, we're open to what you think is priority within the limitations that we are faced with.
Yeah, I think when I did the numbers, now obviously we've had a few more people leave within the last month, which would actually, had we been in the payroll or the the sick time buyback that we're proposing, I think would have saved the city more money. Based on that, my original numbers, though, there was enough to pay for the PTO change, the daily change, which would cost approximately $12,000. So it wasn't a huge pool of money. I do ask the question of what the number for the benefits. Is it still 1.298357406659? Or did y'all figure benefits? I mean, that's what it was last year, so that's why, like, looking at I plugged it back into our spreadsheet.
Our number for benefits that we use to calculate is 31.24%.
31.24. Okay.
And so with that in mind, we're open to, that obviously leads to, how do we rerun the numbers? How would does that alter our thinking? And how does that have its impact on our schedule? We're open to all that.
We did leave the room open for caucus if y'all want to caucus. We're also available beyond the 12:30 timeframe to continue to discuss as well, so if you all are available.
Yeah, we're a bit, Jeff.
So this is a perfect example of the last thing I said before y'all caucused. We're talking about an increase of approximately $107,000 over the 5%. This is a number that I think had we began this bargaining at a time that is more standard across the state, that's something that council could have approved, and we wouldn't have this issue now. But because we're having to deal with the crumbs that are left behind, can we actually have true bargaining at this point, or is this just a take it or leave it situation?
I think that we do have true bargaining, but in any event, there are limitations. We were just straightforward with you with what ours are. And I don't think, especially in light of our history at this municipality, I don't think we would characterize 5% across the board as crumbs. I think we'd say that's a solid raise, and we appreciate council's commitment. But I would agree that council needs to sustain that commitment, and I think that's the key is sustaining that commitment. And I don't think we can do that with a one-year contract or with an annual kind of an approach. I think it's got to be, how do we approach this in a way that helps council maintain that commitment and also helps them fulfill it in some fashion through resource management, whether that's on the revenue side or the expense side or both. And so I think generally we feel good, we as employees, I'm saying, feel good about having a 5% raise proposed. But we understand that that doesn't get everybody. We think, until we won't know with much certainty until we get the results of the study, we think that's not going to get everybody where they need to be, but we think it is a good solid step. And so we haven't been granted any authority to go beyond what council is, and what council has said move forward with, so. But we certainly understand your desire for more.
Oh, and I appreciate the explanation. Let's not mischaracterize. It's not a desire. We're talking about needs at this point. San Angelo is grossly underpaid, in which y'all will discover as the pay study, unfolds. But this is a necessity. Unless San Angelo wants to have an understaffed, under par, unhappy police department, this is a need. It's not a want at this point. 14% under average. That's pretty drastic.
And did you say 107,000 is what you need to fix that?
No, sir. The 107,000 would be the proposal that we presented. The 5% plus the other monetary items would be the 107,000 plus the 5%.
Yeah, so part of it, running my numbers versus versus the 918,000, I come up with a significant difference. We can't include the assistant chiefs because we don't bargain for the assistant chiefs and they're not civil service. If they were removed from their appointed position, obviously they would revert to civil service. But so when I'm doing my calculations, I don't include them because we can't bargain for them, and so our numbers are going to be off there. And so I guess I'm not sure what 5% for them out of that 918 comes to. I'm sure it shrinks it down to somewhere around 900. And I'm actually seeing quite a significant chunk of the difference between just 5% and 5%, along with the other things we're asking, the 107,000, which after recalculation of the benefits is 108. So I'm not sure whether we can get together on the numbers and figure out whether there's a discrepancy or where there might be a discrepancy or where there might be a difference in that fund.
We need to, what you're talking about, we need to do that as part of the process anyway. And so we need you to be comfortable with the numbers, and we need Jonathan and the finance folks to be comfortable with the numbers. So absolutely, this is a process we need to go through.
Right, and just hopefully to set the ground, I think one of the other items that is in that 918,000 is an increase to the overtime budget as well.
Okay.
We're trying to increase that along at the same rate as y'all's increases. That way we can continue to fund overtime going forward.
I'm sorry, what was the other increase?
The overtime.
Oh, overtime?
We are increasing overtime as a part of that 918,000 as well.
Okay.
Right, so that you're not shrinking the overtime hours allotted. That makes sense.
Correct.
I don't know what that number is either, but.
Well, I still think that process of reconciliation, so that both sides are comfortable, we believe it's achievable and you believe it's true, I think is absolutely appropriate. And I'm I think we're open to how you want to handle that also.
I think for now, at least for the financial part, because we're bogging down. If we could just table that and just continue on, because I think there's probably other things too. And we'll try to come to a resolution and figure out on our side how we're gonna approach that, so.
Okay, so aside from the compensation piece, that's what you mean if we can go through the rest of the, okay. So we talked about the sick time payout plan. I haven't fully developed that aside from what was recommended, which is no payout for less than 5 years, 5 to 9 years, 360 hours, 10 to 19 years, 720 hours, 20 to 24 years, 720 hours at 2/3 hourly rate, 25 to 29 years, 1,800 hours at 2/3 hourly rate, and 30 years plus, I imagine, 2,160 at 2/3 of their hourly rate. Is that correct?
I think you just said it differently than what I'm thinking. So 10 to 19, 720, and then 20 to 24, 1440, 25 to 29, 1,800, 30 plus is 2,160. Anything, obviously the first 720 being at full rate as it is now, and then the additional being paid at 2/3 rate.
Yes. Sorry, and you're correct.
Yeah.
So it's essentially doubling up that payout for 20 to 24 years, except it's at 2/3.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and in theory, that's something that we agree on. Mhm. Okay, so then the next item was the PTO program. Again, I think some of the items that have some sort of a financial impact, those are the things that we're asking that you all prioritize, and within our limitations, we can take a look at in terms of what that amount needs to be. I think y'all had recommended $70, increase that to $70. So again, in theory, that's definitely something we're open to, as long as these things fall within what we're limited to. Same thing for the night shift differential. The on-call response, nothing changes there other than there's some clarification around that. You mentioned allowing vacation, United Way, WOW days to count towards regular hours worked, I guess essentially.
Yeah, the idea was not basically excluding sick and if you were leave without pay for some reason. The other beneficial hours, vacation, and there's a multitude of, I mean, there's at least a few different things like WOW and United Way that people get throughout the year because of specific things. And that's what we were we were looking at. We didn't want to incentivize somebody calling in sick, but we have officers that, you know, based on their pay cycle, they may take a vacation this week, but next week is the same pay cycle or the same work period, and they get held over for overtime, and they're getting straight time for the next 36, 40 hours worth.
I'd like to put a cost estimate around that. I know that's going to take a little bit of time. But if we can do that, and maybe bring that back at the next meeting. Equipment stipend. This is something that I indicated at the last meeting that obviously, you know, necessary items to do the essential functions of the job are that for everybody, not just PD in particular. So this is something that we want to develop citywide. I've had some discussions with the chief in terms of potentially what is currently missing that's not being provided. So there is a plan on his behalf to either to continue to provide that or change what's being provided so that it's more in line with what's being requested. I did get a list from Noel for the things that are currently being provided, and so I'm a little bit hesitant to include something like this in an agreement when I think aside from any agreements, it needs to be provided regardless. So that's my opinion on that. I don't know if Tina or Michael or Brandon have anything else to add. Or if y'all have any comments on that,
In
that piece.
watching the budget workshops and going through those things and seeing, you know, what was approved as far as funding requests by the chief, and in conversations with him just in general about what was approved through that process, we see that the city is making an effort in that area specifically to increase funds available, at least for the department, to pay for, I mean, the increase to the body armor, ammunition, those sorts of things. And so I think we're amenable to kind of tabling that for this year and looking at that. And based on what you've said, I think if that's something that y'all want to look at from a holistic approach, then we're okay with that.
Okay. And then I'll let Brandon address some of the disciplinary policy items that were sent over for him to review.
Yeah, so looked at those and visited with the chief, and it is a little more expansive than we expected, but I think in general, especially with regard to the alternative discipline provisions that are in here, we are open to that. What I'd like to do is maybe get a subcommittee and send some red lines back and forth on those, because I think to hammer it out here is going to take a while. But I think as far as alternative discipline, it won't take much tweaking on that. Now, I know we talked about the legal counsel and the officer liaison and the general feeling on that, and we could still talk about this in the subcommittee, but the chief is trying to develop those policies, and I think he's made a commitment to implementing some of those already, even without the policies in place. So he would at least like some time to establish those policies, see what works and doesn't, and then get back to that portion of it later. But again, we're willing to discuss that more in subcommittee and do some red lines.
Yeah, I think as far as the discipline stuff and officers' rights items, I think that's something that can be handled in a subcommittee as far as coming to at least an understanding or opposing views of what's where we're at before we spend a lot of time in a full meeting
Yeah,
hammering that out.
okay.
I do want to ask for a clarification. Those items that were sent over for review, every single one of those sections is something that you want us to consider? Or were there certain sections that,
So what I sent was just a sample of language. I think that was a request at the first meeting, was kind of sample language of what has been implemented in other cities. Lieutenant Kennedy and we're going to sit down and actually create a hard document of what our proposal would be. And that's, a lot of that language is included, but there are some things that obviously would be a little different because San Angelo is different than Abilene or San Marcos or anywhere else that I may pull language from. So we want to make sure that it's relevant to the way things are done here.
so I guess that needs to be sent over.
Yeah, so would y'all want to get together as a subcommittee before we start an initial draft, or do y'all want to begin an initial draft and then send it?
I think we can get an initial draft done and send it, and then have a subcommittee meeting
Okay.
about it.
Yeah,
That works
sounds
best.
good. Yeah.
And I think that's all I had on my list. Did I miss anything?
And you know how rumors are, but maybe this is just a rumor, but, I had heard that, there's possibility that our chief was gonna need to ask for deputy chief's positions, and that was gonna have to come through your side, since that's a city request. Is that something that is actually true, or is that?
That is
something-
correct. We've had the discussions of the deputy chiefs. Currently, the ordinance doesn't align with that, and so that is something that we have to work on if that's the direction that he wants to go. Making those positions tested or appointed is something that does have to be part of an agreement. So I don't know how long it takes to change ordinance. It's usually not a quick process, but that has to happen first before we discuss that as part of an agreement.
Well, which ordinance are you looking at changing in that? Because there is a police captain position.
Yeah, so I think that's what we're talking about, is we would amend that ordinance to, and I think there were two other positions, captain and
There was
there's
something else in the
that's
ordinance
not,
that doesn't
I
align
can
with
try
what
and
currently
find
happens.
that, but essentially, we were gonna, I guess, retitle it to deputy chief and then clean up whatever the duties of that position would be, which I think are, I
think
guess,
the
is
duties-
captain or.
I think the duties across the board throughout all of those positions are incorrect, or completely outdated. I mean, they are old.
Right.
And never have been updated from.
So, I mean, I think we can do it through the agreement. It's just if the agreement goes away, we want the ordinance to align with having those positions and classifications, and then it becomes a tested position like everything else, so.
So I think, I mean, if you wanted, aside from the name change, the captain's positions are still an ordinance. It would just be about the budget amendment, or the budget ordinance to fund those positions, right?
I think that's right.
Okay.
guess
If
we
the
could
chief
keep 'em.
indicates that he wants to keep it as captain,
Yeah.
then, we don't necessarily have to amend that piece of the ordinance. We would just have to talk about the funding, but, and anything else that would change with the agreement as far as it being an appointed position or not, so. As far as I understand it, though, the request is that those be deputy chiefs, so. Aside from that, was there anything else that I maybe missed?
I was just gonna say, the other one in there is police major and police captain are the two.
Yeah, major is synonymous with assistant chief.
Oh, okay.
That's what that position is.
So I'm guessing that this would be a reopener then, I guess at some point if this comes to,
Yeah, we'd be open to that.
well, I mean, is that what y'all's plan is, or is this something y'all want to negotiate in this contract cycle here?
Well, I preferably, depending on, if y'all were agreeable to extending the agreement to the end of September, I was hoping that we could still make those changes within this contract. I know that if there needs to be an ordinance change, it can definitely happen by then. I just don't know that it can happen potentially by the time we finish negotiating this agreement.
If this were to be a tested position, how would council fund those positions? Or in any case, actually, how would these positions be funded if we're talking about doing it during this cycle?
The chief has a plan to fund some of it, but not completely, so we would have to have those conversations with finance.
Then I would suggest that we would definitely need to have a reopener. If council approves these changes, regardless of them being tested or appointed, because if council is going to designate funds to fund these positions, then that tells me that there was money available for other things. So my contention would be we definitely want a reopener for this agreement in the case that those are approved.
I would agree. Okay, so I think in order for us to move forward, a few things need to happen. You would need to indicate to us, after you have time to meet and prioritize things, what your request would be in terms of some of these financially impacted recommendations. One of the things that I think would help us in looking at some of these costs would be if you all have some idea of what, if it's not a 5% increase, of what you're thinking it should be. If you're going to use any of those funds to fund some of the other things. And if you don't have an answer today, that's fine. But that would help us as well in trying to put a cost to those things. And if you need a caucus for that, that's fine also.
I just don't think we're going to have that answer today.
Okay. So we would need then some of those clarifications at the next meeting. In conjunction with that, we will wait and get some of, I guess, your draft sent over to Brandon so we can schedule that subcommittee meeting. I would like to have, obviously, that subcommittee meeting before we have the next meet and confer meeting. And then maybe by that time, I'll have a better answer for you in terms of those two deputy chiefs that the city manager's talking to the chief about. Did I miss anything?
We have an item that it may be more applicable to line 4 on the agenda, so we would just want to make sure that if we were still on 3 or if it were on 4 at this point.
I was still on 3. They kind of blend together. But if there's no, I guess, additional comment in terms of the plan to move forward, then we can move to item 4.
In that case, there was, and one additional thing that we had discussed was the creation of an association leave pool that we would allow officers to donate to in order for the association members to conduct association business and still be compensated, not have to use their personal time. Something similar to a sick leave pool we've established in other cities. And this just kind of helps offset some of the financial burden that these guys that volunteer their time to the betterment of the entire agency, they can, be compensated for that and it not take away from their personal time that they would otherwise spend with their family.
So, a couple of questions on that. So you would, this pool would accept accrued leave from other officers?
Yes, it would be
Like-
cost neutral on the city. It would just be a pool that we would have. So if we have an officer retire and he's got excessive time that he's not going to be able to cash out on, he could donate that to the pool, or members could donate that to the pool. But it would be cost neutral, is the idea.
Would you have parameters in terms of what kind of instances those hours can be requested and used?
Historically, we recommend language that requires the local association to approve that usage in conjunction with a city policy that would limit, abuse, obviously.
Okay. I mean, I think we're open to reviewing what you develop on that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Well, anything else on y'all's side? I'm good. Then we will move to 5 for adjournment at 12:43. If I could get a motion in a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. We'll adjourn at 12:43. Thank you.